The woman who built my empire was never meant to stand beside me forever. Adrian Whitmore's words echoed through the luxury ballroom, and Camille Brooks felt the room become smaller around her. For 8 years, she had been the person behind the plans, the late nights, and the impossible decisions that turned a struggling idea into a billion-dollar company. But tonight, under the glow of cameras and applause, she wasn't introduced as his wife, his partner, or the woman who believed in him before anyone else did. She was simply the person he used to know. The crowd cheered as Adrian accepted the Entrepreneur of the Year award. He stood on the stage wearing a perfectly tailored suit, surrounded by investors, executives, and people who only knew the version of him that success had created. "I want to thank everyone who believed in this vision," he said confidently. "My team, my mentors, and the people who helped me become who I am today." Camille waited. Just for a moment. She waited for him to say her name. She waited for him to remember the small apartment where they sat on the floor eating takeout because they couldn't afford a dining table. She waited for him to remember the nights she stayed awake reviewing business plans while he slept because he had another investor meeting in the morning. But he never did. Instead, Adrian looked toward the cameras and smiled. "Camille and I have decided to move in different directions." A wave of whispers moved through the room. Camille stared at him, trying to understand how a person could erase years of love and sacrifice in a single sentence. When Adrian stepped off the stage, he walked toward her with the same calm expression he used during business negotiations. "I didn't want you to hear it from someone else," he said quietly. Camille looked at the man in front of her, the man she once believed would never forget where he came from. "Hear what, Adrian?" she asked. "That our marriage is over?" He looked away for a second. "You know things changed." "Things changed," Camille repeated. "Or you changed." Adrian sighed. "This life is different now. The company is different. I'm different." Those words hurt more than anger ever could. Because they weren't cruel. They were worse. They sounded reasonable. They sounded like something a person said when they had already convinced themselves they were right. "Do you remember when nobody believed in you?" Camille asked softly. "Do you remember when your first investor rejected you 3 times? When you were ready to quit?" Adrian's expression shifted slightly. He remembered. Of course he remembered. "Camille, I was there," she said. "I believed in you before there was a company, before there was a private office, before people knew your name." Around them, guests continued celebrating, completely unaware that a woman was watching the life she helped create move on without her. Adrian lowered his voice. "I'm grateful for everything you did." Camille looked at him carefully. "Grateful?" she asked. "Is that what I am now? Something you're grateful for?" He didn't answer, and that silence told her everything. Camille had spent years helping Adrian build a future. She had protected his dreams, defended his ideas, and stood beside him when success felt impossible. But somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing her as the woman who helped him rise. He started seeing her as someone who belonged to the chapter he wanted to leave behind. That night, while Adrian returned to the cameras and celebrations, Camille walked outside into the cool evening air. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She simply stood there, looking at the city lights, realizing something painful. The man she helped become successful had finally reached the top. And the first thing he did was let go of the person who helped him get there. 8 years earlier, before the cameras, the awards, and the billion-dollar headlines, Adrian Whitmore was just a man with a dream and a folder full of unfinished ideas. The first time Camille Brooks met him, he was sitting alone in a small coffee shop in downtown Chicago, staring at a business plan that had more problems than answers. She noticed the frustration on his face before she noticed anything else. "You are either about to quit," Camille said as she walked past his table, "or you are about to make the same mistake for the 5th time." Adrian looked up, surprised. "Excuse me." Camille smiled slightly and pointed at the papers in front of him. "Your numbers are impressive, but your strategy is trying to sell a solution before people understand the problem." Most people avoided challenging Adrian. Even back then, he had confidence, ambition, and a way of making people believe he would succeed. But Camille did not see a future billionaire sitting across from her. She saw someone with potential who needed someone willing to tell him the truth. "And you know this because?" Adrian asked. "Because I have spent the last 5 years studying companies that failed," she replied. "Sometimes failure teaches you more than success." That conversation was supposed to last 10 minutes. It lasted nearly 3 hours. Over coffee that turned cold and a stack of papers covered with notes. Camille helped Adrian rebuild his entire approach. She did not just change a few sentences. She helped him understand his customers, organize his finances, and create a plan investors could believe in. A few weeks later, Adrian called her. They said yes, he told her. Camille smiled. The investors? The first major one. There was a pause. I could not have done this without you. Those words stayed with her. Because at that moment, she believed him. Their relationship grew naturally. Late conversations about business became conversations about life. Work meetings became dinners. Friendship became something deeper. Adrian loved that Camille saw him differently from everyone else. She was not impressed by his ambition. She challenged it. When he doubted himself, she reminded him why he started. When others told him to play it safe, she encouraged him to think bigger. After they got married, Camille never cared about the attention that came with Adrian's growing success. She was happy building a life together. Their first home was a small apartment with old wooden floors and a kitchen barely large enough for two people to cook together. They celebrated every milestone, even the small ones. The first 100 customers, the first employee, the first office lease. One day, Adrian told her while they were sitting on their balcony overlooking the city, "People are going to know your name too." Camille laughed. "I do not need everyone to know my name." She looked at him and smiled. "I just need you to remember it." For years, Adrian did remember. He introduced Camille as the person who helped him build everything. He told investors that she was the reason he stayed focused. He said his success was not just his story. It was their story. But success has a way of changing the world around people. The more Adrian achieved, the more people started telling him who he should become. Advisors told him billion-dollar companies needed a different image. Executives told him his personal life affected his brand. Slowly, the man who once valued honesty began listening more to appearances. Camille noticed the changes, but she convinced herself they were temporary. She believed the pressure was overwhelming him. She believed the man she loved was still there. What she did not realize was that the biggest challenge in their marriage was not losing money, losing investors, or losing opportunities. It was losing the connection between two people who once believed they were building the same future. The first sign that Adrian Whitmore was changing was not something dramatic. It was something much smaller, something most people would have ignored. He stopped asking Camille Brooks for her opinion. In the beginning, every major decision started with the same question. "What do you think?" Adrian used to ask her while they sat together reviewing plans late into the night. But now, those conversations became updates instead of discussions. "I already talked to the board," he would say. "The decision has been made." Camille would look at him, waiting for the man who used to value her perspective. But more and more, she saw a stranger wearing a familiar face. The company continued growing. Adrian's name appeared in business magazines. He was invited to exclusive events, photographed with powerful executives, and introduced as one of the most promising entrepreneurs in the country. Everyone around him celebrated the success. Everyone except the woman who had watched the journey from the very beginning. One evening, Camille stood in their kitchen preparing dinner when Adrian walked in wearing a suit from a meeting. He placed his phone on the counter and looked exhausted. "Long day?" she asked. "Every day is a long day now," he replied. Camille smiled gently. "I know. That is why I thought maybe we could take a weekend away. Just us." Adrian looked at her for a moment, then shook his head. "Camille, I cannot keep living like we are still running a small startup from our apartment." The words caught her off guard. "What does that mean?" "It means my life has changed." Camille slowly put down the glass in her hand. "Our life changed." Adrian sighed. "That is exactly what I mean. You still think about things the way we did before." She studied his expression. "Before what?" "Before everything became bigger." It was not the answer that hurt her. It was the way he said it. Like the years they struggled together were something he had already outgrown. Around the same time, Adrian started spending more time with people who cared about image and status. One of those people was Victoria Hayes, a young business executive known for her connections in elite circles. Victoria understood the world Adrian was entering. She knew the right events, the right conversations, and the right people to impress. At first, Camille tried not to think much about it. She trusted her husband. She remembered the man who once promised they would never become the kind of people who forgot where they came from. But then small moments started adding up. Adrian stopped wearing the simple watch Camille gave him on their first anniversary. He replaced it with something more expensive because, according to his assistant, people noticed these things. He started suggesting Camille attend fewer company events because the investors might not understand their dynamic. Their dynamic? Camille asked one night. What does that even mean? Adrian looked uncomfortable. I just mean the company has a certain image now. Camille nodded slowly. She understood what he was really saying. The woman who helped build his confidence was no longer the woman he wanted standing beside him. One afternoon, Camille accidentally saw an invitation on Adrian's desk. It was for a private event with investors and executives. His name was listed with Victoria's, not as business partners. As a pair, Camille stared at the invitation for a long moment. She did not feel anger first. She felt disappointment, because deep down, she realized something painful. Adrian was not replacing her because she failed him. He was replacing her because he believed he had finally become someone who no longer needed her. And that was the moment Camille stopped asking how to save their marriage. She started asking how she had lost herself trying to protect his dream. The night Camille Brooks finally accepted that her marriage was falling apart, she did not find out through a confession. She found out through a sentence that was never meant for her to hear. Adrian, you cannot keep pretending your old life fits with the one you are building now. The voice belonged to Victoria Hayes. Camille stood outside the office door, holding a folder she had planned to give Adrian. It contained a new strategy that could help the company expand into another market, something she had spent weeks preparing. But now she stood completely still, listening to a conversation that changed the way she saw everything. Camille understands business, Adrian replied. But this company has reached a different level. Victoria's voice was calm. Exactly. And sometimes success requires making difficult choices. Camille looked down at the folder in her hands. For years, she had helped Adrian make those difficult choices. She had been there when nobody knew his name. She had believed in his vision before there were investors, awards, or headlines. But standing there, she realized Adrian no longer saw her as the person who helped him build the future. He saw her as a reminder of where he started. Later that evening, Adrian came home and found Camille sitting quietly at the kitchen table. The same table where they once planned their entire future with a laptop, 2 cups of coffee, and dreams bigger than their bank account. We need to talk, Adrian said. Camille looked up. She already knew. About Victoria? His expression changed for a second, just enough to confirm what she suspected. Camille, it is not what you think. She gave a small, tired smile. That is usually what people say when it is exactly what someone thinks. Adrian sat across from her. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did. Her voice was calm. That was what surprised him most. He expected anger. He expected tears. He expected the woman who had always fought for him to fight for them. Instead, Camille simply looked exhausted. I need you to understand something, Adrian said. My life is different now. The company has responsibilities. My position requires me to think differently. Camille nodded. No, you are not talking about the company. She looked directly at him. You are talking about me. Adrian stayed silent. And that silence answered everything. A few days later, Adrian made his decision. He asked Camille to meet with his attorney. He said they needed to discuss a separation. He used careful words. Words that sounded professional. Words that sounded polite. But Camille heard the truth underneath them. He was moving forward. He was creating a new public image. And she was no longer part of it. I want you to know I appreciate everything you have done, Adrian told her. Camille looked at him. Appreciation is not the same as respect. That sentence stayed with him. Because somewhere deep down, he knew she was right. Camille did not leave with anger. She left with a clear mind. Before she walked out, she placed one final document on his desk. It was not a demand. It was not a threat. It was a record of every contribution she had made during the company's early years. The strategies, the partnerships, the ideas that helped turn a small startup into a national brand. Adrian glanced at the pages, but barely looked concerned. Are you trying to claim credit now? He asked. Camille picked up her coat. No, Adrian. I am reminding you that the person you are leaving behind was the person who believed in you before anyone else did. Then she walked away. Adrian thought he had closed the door on the past. He did not realize he had just pushed away the person who understood his success better than anyone. And while he prepared for his next chapter, Camille began preparing for hers. 3 years after Camille Brooks walked away from Adrian Whitmore, most people assumed she disappeared because she had lost. They believed she was the woman left behind while Adrian continued climbing higher. They saw the headlines about his company reaching new records. They They saw his interviews, his magazine covers, and his carefully polished image. But they did not see Camille. They did not see the woman who was quietly rebuilding everything she thought she had lost. After leaving Adrian, Camille moved into a small office space in downtown Chicago. It was nothing like the executive headquarters she once helped create. There were no glass walls, no expensive furniture, and no large team waiting for instructions. There was only a desk, a laptop, and a vision. Her first employee, Marcus Reed, looked around the nearly empty office and smiled. You know, most people do not start a company after a divorce from a billionaire by renting a place with one conference room. Camille laughed softly. Most people also do not know what they are capable of until they have no choice but to find out. She started Brooks Strategic Ventures with one simple idea: help companies solve problems before they became disasters. It was the same skill Adrian once depended on. The difference was that this time, Camille was building something with her own name on it. The beginning was not easy. She spent long nights reviewing contracts, meeting potential clients, and explaining why a small company led by a woman nobody knew deserved a chance. Some investors doubted her. Some people only saw her as Adrian Whitmore's former wife. During one meeting, an investor leaned back and asked, "Are you planning to compete with Adrian, or is this just a personal decision?" Camille looked at him calmly. "I am not building a company because of Adrian. I am building it because I know what I can create." That answer changed the room. Slowly, people started paying attention. One client became 3. 3 became 10. A small team became a growing company. Within 3 years, Brooks Strategic Ventures became one of the fastest-growing consulting firms in the industry. Meanwhile, Adrian's world looked completely different from the outside. He was still successful. His company was still powerful. But behind the scenes, things were becoming complicated. His executives were making decisions based on appearances instead of long-term strategy. The same people who encouraged him to move away from Camille now pushed him towards short-term victories. One morning, Adrian walked into his office and saw a report sitting on his desk. The numbers were not what he expected. A major partnership had failed. A competitor had gained ground. And at the top of the analysis was a company name he had not heard in years: Brooks Strategic Ventures. Adrian stared at the document. "Who is leading this company?" his assistant asked. "Camille Brooks," she replied. For a moment, Adrian said nothing. He read the report again. The strategy was sharp. The decisions were thoughtful. The approach was exactly the kind of thinking he used to admire. Because it was familiar. Too familiar. Later that evening, Adrian searched for information about Camille's company. He saw interviews, business articles, and photos of Camille standing confidently beside her own team. She was no longer the woman waiting behind him at events. She was the person everyone was watching. And for the first time in years, Adrian felt something he never expected. Not jealousy, not anger, regret. Because he finally understood that Camille had not been holding him back. She had always been the person helping him move forward. And while he was busy building a future without her, she had built one without needing him at all. Adrian Whitmore spent years believing he was the person who built everything from nothing. He believed the long nights, the difficult decisions, and the sacrifices belonged only to him. But now, sitting alone in his office, looking through the documents from Brooks Strategic Ventures, he was forced to face a truth he had avoided for years. Camille Brooks had never been standing behind his success. She had been standing beside it. Adrian picked up the report again and read every page carefully. The strategy, the structure, the way the company identified problems before they happened. It all felt familiar. Not because Camille copied him, because he knew exactly where it came from. "This is impossible," he whispered. His assistant, Lauren, looked confused. "Is there a problem with the report?" Adrian placed the document on the desk. "Who prepared this analysis?" "The Brooks team." Their founder reviewed the final strategy herself. Adrian looked out the window at the city below. "Camille reviewed it?" "Yes." The room became quiet. For years, Adrian had told himself that Camille was simply someone who supported him during the early days. He thought she was part of his story, but not the reason for it. Now he was beginning to see things differently. He remembered the meetings where investors questioned his ideas. Camille was always the person who found the missing answer. He remembered the financial problems that nearly ended his company. Camille was the one who created a plan that saved them. He remembered the first major partnership that changed everything. Camille was the one who convinced the other side to believe in them. Adrian had spent years accepting the applause while forgetting who helped him reach the stage. That realization became impossible to ignore when he attended a business conference in New York. The event was filled with executives, investors, and entrepreneurs. Adrian arrived expecting the same attention he always received. But this time, the conversations were different. "Have you heard about Camille Brooks?" one executive asked another. "Her company is changing the consulting industry." Adrian heard her name from people who had never known her as his wife. They knew her as a leader, a founder, a woman who built something impressive on her own. Later that evening, Adrian watched an interview where Camille spoke about her journey. The interviewer asked, "What was the hardest part of starting over?" Camille paused before answering. "The hardest part was realizing that I had spent so much time helping someone else believe in themselves that I forgot to believe in myself." Adrian stopped moving. Her words stayed with him. Not because they were meant to hurt him, because they were true. He expected anger from Camille. He expected her to attack his reputation or tell the world what happened. But she never did. She simply moved forward. And somehow, that made him feel even more ashamed. Meanwhile, inside Brooks Strategic Ventures, Camille was preparing for her company's biggest opportunity yet. A major partnership could transform her business from a successful firm into a global organization. Her team celebrated the possibility, but Camille remained focused. "This is not about proving anything to anyone," she told Marcus. "This is about building something that belongs to us." Marcus smiled. "You know, 3 years ago, you were trying to recover from losing everything." Camille looked at the office around her. "I thought I lost everything. I actually lost the thing that was stopping me from seeing my own value." Across the city, Adrian finally understood the mistake he had made. He did not lose Camille because she changed. He lost her because he stopped recognizing her. And now, for the first time, he wanted to know if there was any way to earn back the trust of the woman he once took for granted. Adrian Whitmore had spent years believing that success meant always moving forward. More deals, more growth, more recognition. But now, standing in front of Camille Brooks again, he realized there was one thing he never learned how to do. Look back. The meeting was supposed to be simple. A business discussion between two successful executives. Nothing personal. Nothing complicated. At least, that was what Adrian told himself. Camille sat across from him in a modern conference room overlooking downtown Chicago. She looked calm, confident, and completely different from the woman he remembered leaving behind. Not because she had changed who she was, because she no longer needed anyone's approval. Adrian placed a folder on the table. "I wanted to talk about a possible partnership." Camille looked at the folder but did not open it. "Between our companies?" "Yes." She studied his face for a moment. "Why now, Adrian?" He hesitated. Years ago, he would have had an answer ready. A perfect business explanation. But this time he struggled. "Because I believe our companies could work well together." Camille nodded slowly. "That sounds like the answer you would give a reporter." Adrian looked down. "Maybe because I spent a long time saying what people wanted to hear." That sentence surprised both of them. For a moment, Camille saw a small piece of the man she once knew. The man who admitted when he was afraid. The man who used to ask for her advice. But then she remembered everything that happened after success changed him. "You know what was hardest for me?" Camille asked. "It was not losing the lifestyle. It was not losing the house or the public image. It was realizing the person I trusted most was the person who made me feel replaceable." Adrian took a slow breath. "Camille, I know I hurt you." "You do not know yet," she replied quietly. "Knowing you hurt someone and understanding why are two different things." Her words stayed with him. Because deep down, Adrian knew she was right. For years, he apologized for the consequences, but he never truly faced the choices that created them. Meanwhile, outside the conference room, Adrian's own company was beginning to face problems he could no longer ignore. The leadership team he built after pushing Camille away was focused on appearances instead of stability. Several investors had concerns about recent decisions. A major client was considering moving to another firm. The same people who once praised every move he made were now asking difficult questions. During a board meeting, one executive said, "We need a different approach. The market is changing faster than we expected." Adrian looked at the presentation on the screen. The solutions were obvious. He knew that because he had seen those problems before. And so had Camille. After the meeting, Adrian sat alone in his office. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to admit something painful. He did not miss Camille because she was successful now. He missed her because she was the only person who challenged him when everyone else simply agreed. That evening, Adrian visited the old apartment building where they once lived. The place looked smaller than he remembered. He stood outside for a few minutes, remembering the nights when they planned a future they both believed in. Back then, they had almost nothing, but they had each other. Now he had everything people dreamed about. Yet somehow, he felt the emptiness of losing the one person who saw him before the world did. The next morning, Adrian made a decision. He would not ask Camille to come back. He would not expect forgiveness because of a few words. If he wanted any chance of repairing what he destroyed, he had to prove it through actions. For the first time, Adrian understood that winning back Camille's trust would require something success never taught him: humility. Adrian Whitmore quickly learned that saying sorry was much easier than changing. For years, he had built his life around quick decisions, confident statements, and moving forward before anyone could question him. But rebuilding trust was different. There was no shortcut. There was no business strategy that could fix a broken relationship. There was only patience, honesty, and the willingness to accept that he might never get back what he lost. The first thing Adrian did was not call Camille. He did something much harder. He admitted the truth publicly. During a company meeting with his executives and investors, Adrian stood in front of the same people who once celebrated his success. "There is something I need to correct," he said. The room became quiet. "For years, I allowed people to believe I built this company alone. That was not true." Some executives exchanged confused looks. Adrian continued. "Camille Brooks was part of the foundation of this company. Her work, her ideas, and her decisions helped create what this organization became." It was not a dramatic speech. There were no excuses. No attempt to make himself look better. Just the truth. When Camille heard about it, she did not celebrate. She simply listened. Marcus, her business partner, looked at her and said, "You know, most people would enjoy seeing someone finally admit they were wrong." Camille looked out the window of her office. "Maybe, but an apology does not erase what happened." Marcus nodded. He understood. Camille had spent years rebuilding her confidence. She was not waiting for Adrian to admit her value. She already knew it. A few weeks later, Adrian asked to meet again. This time, there was no business proposal waiting on the table. No contract. No partnership discussion. Just a conversation. "I owe you more than an apology," Adrian said. Camille looked at him quietly. "Then what do you owe me?" Adrian took a moment before answering. The truth. He admitted that he allowed success to change the way he viewed people. He admitted that he cared too much about how others saw him and not enough about who had been there from the beginning. "I thought becoming successful meant leaving my old life behind," he said. "I did not realize I was leaving behind the person who believed in me before I had anything." Camille looked away for a moment. Those words mattered, but she had learned not to confuse words with change. "Adrian, I believe you regret it," she said. "But regret is not the same as growth." He nodded. "I know." And for once, he did not argue. He did not try to convince her. He simply accepted it. That was the difference. Over the next several months, Adrian started proving his intentions through actions. He corrected old company records to properly recognize Camille's contributions. He returned opportunities that should have belonged to her. He stopped trying to control the story and allowed the truth to exist without needing to be the hero. Meanwhile, Camille continued building her company. She did not slow down because Adrian changed. Her success was no longer connected to his approval. One evening, after a major business event, Adrian and Camille stood outside discussing everything that had happened. "You know what I miss the most?" Adrian asked. Camille looked at him. "What?" "Not the company. Not the success. I miss the person I was before I forgot what really mattered." Camille was quiet. For the first time in a long time, she saw something different in him. Not the powerful CEO. Not the man everyone admired. Just Adrian. The person she once loved. But she also knew something important. Forgiveness could be offered. Trust had to be earned. And if Adrian truly wanted a second chance, he would have to understand that love was not about returning to the past. It was about becoming better than the people they used to be. 1 year later, Camille Brooks stood in front of a crowded auditorium, looking at a room filled with entrepreneurs, investors, and young professionals who came to hear her speak. The woman standing on that stage was not the same woman who once stood silently in the corner of a ballroom, watching the man she loved accept an award without mentioning her name. She was no longer waiting for someone else to recognize her value. She had already recognized it herself. Success is not measured by how many people know your name, Camille told the audience. It is measured by whether you can look in the mirror and know you did not abandon yourself along the way. The room became quiet, because everyone understood that those words came from experience. After the speech, Marcus walked beside her as they left the stage. You realize people are going to quote that everywhere, right? He said with a smile. Camille laughed. That was not the goal. I know, Marcus replied. That is why people will remember it. Across the city, Adrian Whitmore watched a recording of the speech from his office. He had heard Camille speak many times before, but this time felt different. Not because she was successful. He already knew she was. It felt different because he finally understood what he had almost lost. He saw a woman who did not need revenge to prove she had won. She had built a life where his absence no longer defined her. A few weeks later, Adrian and Camille met at a small coffee shop. The same kind of place where they first talked about business years ago. No cameras. No executives. No expectations. Just two people having an honest conversation. I used to think I lost you because you walked away, Adrian said. Camille looked at him. And what do you think now? He smiled sadly. I think I lost you long before that. I lost you when I stopped seeing the person beside me. Camille looked down at her coffee for a moment. She appreciated the honesty. She appreciated the growth. But she also knew that life was not a movie where one apology fixed every broken piece. Adrian, I believe you changed, she said. But we cannot pretend the past did not happen. He nodded. I know. And I am not the same person I was before. I know that too. For the first time, there was no pressure between them. No need to force a decision. No need to rewrite history. They simply accepted where they were. Over time, Adrian continued becoming a different kind of leader. He stopped chasing approval and started focusing on responsibility. He mentored young entrepreneurs and openly shared the mistakes that almost cost him the most important relationship of his life. Camille continued growing her company, creating opportunities for people who once felt invisible, just like she had. Their paths did not return to where they started. They created something new, built on respect instead of dependence. Years earlier, Camille believed she lost everything when Adrian left. But she eventually learned something more powerful. Sometimes losing the person who no longer sees your worth is the moment you finally see your own. Adrian believed success was reaching the top. Camille discovered that true success was becoming someone you were proud to be, even when nobody was watching. And that was the lesson they both carried forward. The people who truly matter are not always the ones who arrive when you have everything. Sometimes they are the ones who stand beside you when you have nothing. And if you are lucky enough to have someone who believes in you before the world does, never become so successful that you forget their name.